92 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access, Information, Privacy and Ethics, conformément à l'article 108.3H.
Pursuant to Standing Order 108.3H and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, January 31st, 2023, the committee is resuming its study of the use of social media platforms for data harvesting and unethical or illicit sharing of personal information with foreign entities. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. Members can attend in person or via Zoom.
And that care must be taken with regard to the earpieces for interpretation. Please be mindful not to place your earpiece near the microphone, as this can result in feedback causing injury to our interpreters. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour today. We have from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Peter Mado, Director General, Intelligence Assessments. Welcome, Peter. Sherry Henderson, who is the Assistant Director of Requirements, and from the Communications Security Establishment, we have Sammy Curry, who's the head of the Canadian Centre for Cyber Security. I'm going to start with our representatives from CSIS. You have up to 5 minutes for your opening statement. I'm not sure who's giving it, but please, Sherry, go ahead, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Sherry Henderson, and I'm an Assistant Deputy Minister and Assistant Director of Requirements at CSIS. C'est un honneur que de pouvoir me joindre à vous.
It is an honor for me to join you today to have this opportunity to contribute to your important discussion on social media and foreign entities. I am accompanied by my colleague Peter Madu, Director General Strategic Bureau,
to this committee on the national security concerns related to data sharing with foreign entities like the People's Republic of China and the role that CSIS plays in ensuring the protection of Canada's prosperity, national security interests, and the safety of Canadians. Les acteurs étatiques étrangers mènent
Foreign state actors leverage all viable means to carry out their foreign interference activities, and social media platforms are ideal tools.
Russian Federation and the PRC exploit media to spread disinformation, leveraging suggestive algorithms to amplify echo chambers and manipulating content for unsuspecting viewers. This utility was indeed evident in the 2016 United States presidential election and continues to be of concern in Canada. These same characteristics of social media are also weaponized by extremist threat actors to radicalize and recruit users. Social media platforms are of interest to threat actors because of the data that they generate and collect. Social media platforms run surveys, collate data sets, and request access to users' personal data through terms and conditions, enabling access to users' photo albums, messages, and contact lists. Although some of this data is benign in isolation, when collected and collated on a massive scale, it can provide detailed patterns and insights on populations, public opinion, and individual networks. Canadians should therefore be aware of the privacy considerations at play when choosing to share their personal information online, especially when it is with foreign-owned companies that are based outside of Canada or our allied countries. Authoritarian states like the PRC leverage big data, including from the private sector, to carry out their foreign interference activities. While government use of data in Canada is strictly governed to respect ethical, legal, and privacy considerations, authoritarian states are not similarly limited. The PRC uses this unfettered access to harvest data at a scale that outpaces every other country in the world combined, while fiercely protecting their own information. Emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, will only further enable their nefarious activities. Through its 2017 National Intelligence Law, the PRC compels individuals, organizations, and institutions including social media platforms operating in China, to provide mass information to the government of China. This information is then used to assist the PRC security and intelligence services in carrying out a wide variety of intelligence work. PRC-based organizations and PRC citizens are also required to protect the secrecy of all state intelligence work. This policy supports and is reflective of the PRC's bold and sustained attempts to conduct foreign interference in Canada. It is imperative that Canada builds resilience against foreign interference. This includes bolstering awareness of the PRC's ability to harvest and use Canadians' information obtained through social media to conduct the foreign interference. For example, CSIS X account recently posted a thread on how PRC intelligence services used LinkedIn to target Canadians by deceptively posing as interested business contacts looking for consultants in Canada while unknowingly providing privileged information that is of interest to the PRC to trained intelligence officers. Une approche englobant toute la société.
A global approach is more than necessary to protect the national security of Canadians, starting with frank and enlightened discussions between communities, academia, businesses, and governments at all levels. It is important that social media users be aware of the risks associated with sharing personal data on certain platforms. CSIS remains a committed partner in this effort, and our team of dedicated and talented professionals are working hard to keep Canadians safe, secure, and prosperous.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sherry, for your opening statement. We're next going to go to Mr. Curry, who is the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. Sir, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of Parliament. I'm pleased to be joining today's meeting, and I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. My name is Sami Kouri, and I'm the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, also known as the Cyber Centre, and the Cyber Centre is part of the Communication Security Establishment. En tant qu'autorité technique du Canada en matière
As a technical authority on cybersecurity, we intend to use our expertise to keep safe the information and systems that Canadians rely on every day.
defend the country's valuable cyber assets, lead Canada's federal response to cybersecurity events, and raise Canada's cybersecurity bar so that Canadians can live and work online safely and with confidence. At the Cyber Centre, we share advice and guidance with Canadians regarding online dangers, and this includes informing how they can protect themselves and their organization most effectively from the threat social media apps could potentially pose. Nous aidons aussi le gouvernement.
We also help inform Government of Canada policy decisions regarding cybersecurity, including the use of social media apps, which are an important online communications tool to reach Canadians.
Here, the Treasury Board Secretariat issued a statement announcing the ban of the use of the TikTok application on government-issued mobile devices. And as recently as last week, a similar announcement was made regarding the use of the WeChat. Both decisions were made by the Chief Information Officer of Canada, who assessed that the app in question present an unacceptable level of risk. While these bans apply solely to government-issued devices, both TBS statements led Canadians to guidance published by the Cyber Centre. In our unclassified National Cyber Threat Assessment of 2023-24 report, we assessed that foreign states are using social media to target Canadian individuals. Public reporting by the University of Toronto Citizens Lab detailed how cyber threat activity has targeted activists in Canada through disinformation or intimidation on social media, denial of service attack against their organizations, and compromise of their personal devices. Beyond cyber threat activity against individuals, states are very likely using foreign-based social media and messaging applications popular with the diaspora groups in Canada and around the world to monitor communications. States can take advantage of permissive terms of use and their own legislative power to compel data sharing This activity threatens the privacy of the communities using these applications. Les Canadiennes et Canadiens qui ont
Canadians with commercially sensitive information on their devices should be especially cautious when granting access to their devices.
apps and social media platforms are created equal. Some platforms are more responsible where you potentially don't have to worry about the data falling in the hands of a nation state, but other platforms are too close to that line. The Cyber Centre strongly recommend that Canadians make well-informed decisions for themselves about what online services they are willing to use. Effectuer ces évaluations et
Conducting these assessments and making these decisions does not have to be difficult, and the Cyber Centre has published online resources to make this process easier.
researching the apps or platform to determine whether it's trustworthy. This includes reading the terms of use and conditions, find out what is being said about a particular app in the media and other trusted sources, and most importantly, know what you are consenting to. Ask yourself whether this app really needs access to your personal data, like your contact list. While it may seem unimportant to review a platform security and privacy function, doing so allows you to avoid using apps that lack strong authentication protection, is well worth the time invested. Enfin, ne sacrifiez.
Finally, always prioritize security over convenience and consider where your data is being stored and how this may affect your privacy.
Social media have changed the way Canadians communicate, stay in touch, and build new relationships. Alors que les menaces liées aux médias
As the social media threat landscape continues to evolve, Canadians must make sure to make responsible and informed decisions about how best to protect themselves and their information online.
to adopt better privacy and security protection, you could also help support your family members and loved ones. Again, thank you for the invitation to appear today, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Curry. Great advice. Just for the benefit of our witnesses, just make sure you have it on the language of your preferred choice, because you will be getting questions in both languages. And we are going to start with Mr. Barrett for 6 minutes. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett, please.
Thanks very much. How many illegal police stations are operating in Canada? I'll direct the question to CSIS, please.
So, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back a bit in my memory here. I think at the time, first of all, I'm not sure that I would necessarily call them police stations. I think what we have seen over the past few months is individuals who have links back to the PRC, who are supporting some of the work of the PRC. Often individuals who have been perhaps co-opted. We at one point were looking at, and it was in the media, I think there were 3 that were being looked at, and the RCMP was fully engaged in regards to those stations, and I wouldn't want to comment any more in regards to the activities of the RCMP.
Is it your understanding that they're continuing to operate, or that they've been closed?
Point of order, Chair.
Go ahead with your point of order.
Thank you. Our study is on social media platforms. I'm trying to see the connection between our study and the questions being asked.
Sure,
of the
Mr.
witnesses.
Barrett will make a connection at some point. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I understand your point, but
On that
it's
point
his
of
time. I'm
on
going to
that-
give him. I'm
on
going to
the
give
point
him
of
his
order
time.
then,
Go
Chair?
ahead.
On the point of order.
Go ahead, Mr.
Well,
Barrett.
the question is speaks to transnational repression, and I think that it's important to establish that there's foreign state actors engaged in this, and the activity that is done. In the example that I'm attempting to ask the witnesses about, is perpetrated by the same state actors who are engaging in this transnational repression using social media technologies, and some of which were outlined in the initial statements. But I mean, I'm not sure how much I need to qualify my line of questioning, but I'm happy to go further on the committee's time, but not out of my questioning time, if that's what you'd like.
Okay, thank you. And just for the benefit of members of the committee, I generally try to give a lot of latitude to each member who's given their 6 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the case is. I expect that Mr. Barrett's going to make a connection. He made a compelling argument there, and I'm going to continue with Mr. Barrett. I did stop your time. You have 4 minutes and 51 seconds. Go ahead.
So, Beijing conducting transnational repression activities here on our soil, evidenced by these so-called police stations, if you will, meaning that Chinese Canadians are being targeted for intimidation and influence. That's the purpose of these so-called police stations.
So what I would say to that is I wouldn't specifically focus on the so-called police stations. What I would say to you is there is absolutely foreign interference activity happening in our country, but it can come in all forms and varieties. By focusing on just the police station, I worry that individuals would then miss what else is happening in the environment.
And I appreciate that. Is it understood that it's a technique of the dictatorship in Beijing to scrape social media to be able to isolate and target the people that they're looking to, that are the intended targets of those repressive activities? Is social media a tool that is used so that their agents that are acting out of these locations they can gather that intelligence and then target those individuals?
So I think that's a really interesting question and one that we actually need to discuss. And a lot of it comes to how Canadians protect their own personal information, or any citizen of the world, let's say. So if you are quite open at putting a lot of your personal information out on social media, absolutely hostile states are going to be able to scrape that data, regardless. It doesn't have to be China. It could be other hostile states that we're dealing with. And I think that's also very important. Don't lose sight of all of the hostile activity directed against Canadians by focusing on just one actor. It's really important to totally protect all of your social media access, your data that you put out on there, because you're absolutely right in the comment that you made that hostile states will pull that information, they can collate and they can crunch the big data, and they can do very targeted attention if they want to.
So foreign state actors don't just target the diaspora communities within our country. They also target elected officials, and we've seen media reports about those efforts. In recent months, we saw that there were stories about a spamouflage campaign targeting certain politicians on their social media. Has the dictatorship in Beijing been identified as the source of that campaign?
Sammy, would you be able to answer that particular question? I'm not. Okay. I'm not sure if I could indicate whether or not it went actually back to China. I'd have to go back and see what actually we knew about that. But what I can say is, again, you're very right. Individuals will pull all of that data and target who they feel is somebody that they either need to try and repress, they want to get more information on them, they want to try and influence them in regards to the activities they may be engaging in. So absolutely, social media can be used in order to collect the information to do that.
And so these are foreign interference activities, even if you aren't able to say which foreign state actor is responsible. That's what these activities are.
I would term that as a foreign interference activity, yes.
And are you able to say how many Canadian politicians have been targeted by foreign state actors engaging in these interference activities? Just a number, if you could.
Yeah, I couldn't give you a specific number, but again, what I would say is every single politician, member of parliament should always be aware and protect their personal information, their privacy, and be aware of if somebody or an entity is trying to approach you in order to engage in some sort of foreign interference activity. It can come in all forms and shapes.
Sure. Are you able to say how the rapid response mechanism came into play in the case of the spamouflage targeting of elected officials?
No, that would be GAC. GAC would be, or Foreign Affairs is the one that manages the rapid response mechanism.
Sure. So at what point is your understanding that government is made aware of attempts by foreign state actors to target Canadians, including Canadian politicians? Is it specifically GAC, or does our national security agency like CSIS engage at some point, obviously being aware that this is ongoing?
Yep, so absolutely. The Minister of Public Safety back several months ago issued a ministerial directive which indicated that if we became aware of, within the service, of activities of negative activities directed against politicians by hostile foreign states, then we were to look at the information, determine the threat value of that information, and then reach out and advise the various political actors.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Ms. Henderson, Ms. Damoff, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to both organizations for the work you do to keep Canadians safe. You don't get enough credit for the work you're doing behind the scenes, so I just want to thank you for everything that both organizations are doing. Specifically on TikTok, we had them appear here as a witness, and they told us that the only thing they collect is an email address and the age. And I'm going to ask about the age in a minute, but would you say that that's accurate in terms of the information that they are collecting from individuals online? I'm not sure which is better prepared to answer it, but my understanding, you can gather a lot more just by what people search, and I asked them that. That tells you a lot of, you can tell if people have a heart condition because of what they're looking for, you know, on their searches. So, Mr. Curry, you look like you're ready to respond.
Sorry, thank you for the question. What I would say is that I think we need to distinguish a little bit between what is required to register maybe for a TikTok account and what is required or what is being asked for in terms of to enhance your user experience. So there might be additional accesses, as I pointed out in my opening comments, about giving access of your contact list, of your calendar, of other sorts of privacy setting in your phone in order to enhance the user experience. And that's what maybe the secondary offer of information that is being collected through TikTok.
So they were quite adamant that no information was being shared with China, that their servers were in the United States, Indonesia, and I think it was Malaysia. So what led the government to ban TikTok from government devices? It wouldn't have been a decision you took lightly.
Thanks again for the question. So the banning of TikTok on government devices was a decision made by the Treasury Board CIO of Canada based on an aggregate risk level that was deemed too high. And from a government perspective, you know, the aggregation of all of that information could potentially expose, you know, who our contacts are within governments, who our activities are within governments, and I suspect from a privacy perspective, this is what led the CIO to promulgate a policy around banning the application from government systems.
So I want to talk about youth, because TikTok is not alone in this, but they've said that they've got all these safeguards in place so that young people are not using TikTok. And I would argue it doesn't matter whether it's TikTok or Instagram or a number of social media platforms. Youth are sharing an inordinate amount of data on their social media accounts, which can lead to exploitation. So I guess first I'd like you to comment on youth exposure to these social media platforms and whether the platforms are doing enough to limit their exposure, and also what we can be doing even as a government to support young people and so they know what is happening, because they don't right now.
Thanks again for the question. So our concern at the Cyber Center is one of raising awareness of the threats posed by social media app and educating users about the privacy settings and their sort of best practices and how to use those applications. So not to volunteer too much personal information, to ensure that the privacy settings on the apps are as tuned as possible to the particular user. Recognizing that in some cases the apps, where is the data hosted and who has access to the data can pose an additional risk to the user. And in that case, you know, where the data is hosted, if it's hosted in some country, it might pose less of a risk than maybe in a place like China or others. So our role is really one of education and raising awareness to the threat posed by these applications.
Would you support the social media platforms needing to have their privacy terms and conditions in a more user-friendly way. You can have the legalese one, but sort of highlighting what you're actually agreeing to, because I would bet 95% of Canadians don't actually read those terms and conditions when they go through them. Do you think that there should be more of an onus on them to simplify that so that you've got to agree to the simplified one and the longer one?
I think informing Canadians of what it is that they are signing up to, in a way, is absolutely important. We can describe it through our cybersecurity advice and guidance, but if it's explained in a language that also on individual apps that user understand exactly what they're consenting to sharing and with whom, that definitely will help everybody be aware of what it is happening in the background.
Okay, I think I've only got about 30 seconds left, Chair. Is there any other recommendations that either of you would have for us that you haven't already shared, particularly with regards to young people?
I don't have any recommendations per se, but I would like to pick up on one thing that you noted, and that was the vulnerability of our youth. And what I am very worried about is that some of the youth do get onto these social media platforms, and then they can get into an extremist milieu, and then they can get very influenced in a negative way. And I think that is something that we need to be quite concerned with and aware. They make connections, and they get into almost an echo chamber. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of.
Thank you, Ms. Damoff, Ms. Henderson, Mr. Curry. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes, vous avez la parole.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the witnesses for coming to share with us today. Madam Anderson, I would like you to tell us something. You established a link between foreign interference and the risks on the platforms. Could you please tell us more about that?
Oui, merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for your question. I'll answer in English.
What I would like to explain a little bit more is the fact that a lot of individuals do go onto social media platforms. They do share a lot of information. And as my colleague Sammy noted, sometimes it's just what your likes are. Sometimes it's things that you follow. You have your camera on. You have your pictures. It's all up on social media. Foreign actors with a hostile intent can pull all of that information together and get a very good picture of who you are as an individual and how they might be able to influence you. The other thing that we find happening among social media is that it seems to be a very good place for trends to be noted and seen. So if a foreign actor is wanting to determine what kind of trend might be happening in a certain area, they can keep an eye on what's happening in the social media platform. Where are people voting? What are people worried about? What are people concerned with? What misinformation or disinformation are they following? So that is why I say that these are very strong tools that can be actually used to harm and engage in foreign interference activity.
Donc, si je comprends bien,
If I understand you well, in order to avoid sharing such information, you need to have read the conditions, agreed not to share your personal information. Once people start using social media platforms, is it too late to step back?
So thank you for the question. I don't think it's ever too late to step back, but I would say in some cases the horse may already have left the barn. And you do have to be a little bit worried about that, but people do change as they move forward. So if you stop sharing that personal information or more attuned to what you're sharing, even from today moving forward, I think you are starting to put some protections in around your social media presence.
dites-moi également, vous avez mentionné
You also said that China is not the only actor involved in foreign interference. What networks should we be careful with besides TikTok? What countries are they linked to, for example?
So I always hate to narrow things down because then I do worry that people start to focus only on those threat actors. But I think it's everyone in this room is probably already aware that another actor we're concerned about is Russia. And we also are concerned about Iran, North Korea. those are the ones that are on the top of our list at the moment. But I would say that you should even think broader than that and always protect what's ever on your social media account. You never know who's looking and who's trying to gather more information on you.
Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse, mais dites...
Thank you very much for your answer. When we think about TikTok, we think of China. You talked about Russia and North Korea. What are the networks that we could associate these other foreign partners to, the platforms?
So I myself am not fully aware of all the networks within those specific countries. But again, what I would say is you, as an innocent individual on a social media account, you need to try and find out where that social media account is generating from. And so the more information that Canadians take to get themselves informed, the more they will be protected. So you may think it's not one of coming out of a state that we may be concerned about, but if you start to dig a little deeper, you might get there. So I would say always double check and make sure that you know exactly what you're engaging in and who you're engaging with to the best of your ability.
Et selon vous, parce que j'imagine des adolescents de 14...
In your opinion, I believe that 14 or 15-year-olds don't have that concern about checking the final destination of their data. We see that the consent forms are not read, they are very complicated, and we don't also know the final destination of our data. How can we help young people, the youngest people, to better understand the stakes here so that they do not share their personal information carelessly?
I think that's an extremely good question, an extremely difficult question to answer. I think a lot of it goes back to what my colleague, Mr. Khoury, said, and that's education, constant education, but not only education at the adults, but education at all levels. And I think, and I'm not a policy person, I'm an operational person, but I think it would be very important to figure out ways to educate the youth and engage on that level. And I think there's other government departments that can support that sort of work.
Merci. Monsieur Khoury, la même question, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you. Mr. Khoury, could you answer the same question? Thank you very much. I would like to add to what my colleague has just said. Education is very important to inform them. But in reality, in the case of China, it's clear that the concerns are more complex. But all information that we put in the public domain online is something that could be concerning. So it's important for us to teach the young people and the youngest people about the risks of publishing such information, the risks that they could pose in the future. The risks may not be immediate, but these are dangers that could affect the image of the person later on. Thank you, Mr. Khoury. Thank you, Mr. Vermeer. Mr. Green, 6 minutes.
Put a series of questions to you. First of all, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure, as just a working class guy from Hamilton, to be able to ask questions to the CSE and to CSIS. This is kind of cool. So I'm going to put some direct questions to you. I'm going to ask you to answer them as directly as you possibly can. On the 27th of February 2023, the Government of Canada announced that it was banning the use of TikTok applications on government mobile devices. This is for you, Mr. Khoury. Was the Communications Security Establishment consulted when this decision was made?
Yes.
And was CSIS consulted when this decision was made?
I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. In the consultations that you had, what feedback did you provide the government on singling out TikTok for this type of ban?
Our advice is one of, so thank you again for the question. We are not regulated and we don't assess every app out there. So our advice is how to consider the risk from a privacy perspective to the sort of permissive settings that the app is requesting. So,
sure.
And along with the ban of TikTok, we had also put out an advice and guidance on social media applications for Canadian and for Canadian businesses on.
But specific to the government in the ban,
yes,
you know, it would appear to me that you would have a strong rationale. You talked about an acceptable level of risk, and yet you know all the focus seems to be on the fact that this is a state-owned actor through ByteDance. So I want to put the question to you in relation to surveillance or data capitalism or algorithmic capitalism. In other words, what's to stop a Facebook, an X or Twitter or any other platform from simply collecting the same data and selling it third party to the same hostile actors that you've identified?
Thanks for the question. Just on the TikTok, just in case it didn't come out clearly, it's present an unacceptable level of risk. That's why the application was banned.
So what's acceptable?
I think many apps that we have on our government phone are apps that are level of risk is acceptable. And in our advice and guidance on what we put on our government phones, we look at a number of things: security control, who's behind the app.
Sure. So in your time with the CSE, how long have you been with them for?
32 years.
Okay, so you were here in 2016, and you were here particularly in 2019 when the joint investigation by the Privacy Commissioner brought to light the Cambridge Analytica scandal in Facebook?
I was at CSE. I wasn't in my current role, but I was
Sure.
at CSE. Yes.
And were you advising on that as well? Did you have any knowledge of that as well?
I wasn't in a position where I was my.
But you
advice.
would recall that this British consulting
Yes.
firm, Cambridge Analytica, accessed and harvested 87 million profiles, was involved in Brexit, was involved in the Trump campaign. Do you have any knowledge of them having involvements in Canadian politics?
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware?
I'm not aware, no.
Okay. So you wouldn't know then in 2016 that the Liberal Research Bureau contracted Euronia Technologies under the founding member of Cambridge Analytica, Christopher Wiley, for a pilot project in 2016. He was the whistleblower. Are you aware of that at all?
No,
No.
I'm not aware of that.
So would it concern you that the founding member of Cambridge Analytica, who was later on involved in a significant scandal regarding the Trump campaign and Brexit, provided services, a contract with a Canadian political party, and yet when we're doing a threat an analysis, Facebook is never mentioned? How come?
I think in our role at the Cyber Center, we want to make sure that we expose the threats and we educate Canadian and Canadian organizations about the threat and invite them to ask themselves the question
Sure.
on how to protect.
But respectfully, like this is
Yeah.
me, I'm just a working class guy from Hamilton. It took me 10 minutes on Google to find that information. You're with the CSE. So how is it that when you're doing a threat analysis on social media that you don't find the threat of what I'll call, algorithmic capitalism, the harvesting and the sale of information for political purposes that would undermine democratic processes? Like that, I find that astonishing, to be quite frank with you, because when you talk about what's an acceptable level of risk, we've seen the impacts with Brexit and Trump. Cambridge Analytica and Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg's company, had to testify in front of the U.S. Congress, had to pay fines in Europe for their interference in political processes. And yet, the only time we talk about threats are related to state-owned actors and not corporate actors, which are often hostile and, quite frankly, more mercenary when it comes to surveilling diasporic communities. I reference, the ways in which dictatorial regimes target their civilian populations here. So I'll put the question to you. When you're doing your threat analysis, do you consider all of the other platforms and all of the other ways in which algorithmic capitalism can buy and sell our information and undermine our democratic institutions?
We definitely factor all of that into our threat assessment. But when we put out our advice and guidance, we pose a set of questions that individually we encourage Canadian and Canadian organizations to answer.
I'm talking about the banning of an app on government devices. I'm not talking about your PR stuff with the public. I'm not interested in that. We're here today on a very specific topic in terms of why it is we're banning, for me, one social media outlet and not all of them. So I would put to you, would you not agree that Facebook, Twitter, Instagram also contain significant ways in which they scrape our data, control our likes, funnel us into different news streams, create echo chambers, and ultimately create profiles on us? Is that not correct?
Quick answer.
Information that could potentially be that can potentially contribute to the data mining exercise of whomever is at the other end of that data lake.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Curry, that concludes our first round of questioning. On va commencer avec le deuxième tour.
We'll start our second round. Mr. Gould, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. We hardly have witnesses like you with such high levels of responsibility. Thank you for working for the safety of Canadians. Let me come back to the foreign interference involved in the 2019 and 2021 elections. Did you have the capacity to identify that? Anybody can answer.
Je vais inviter ma collègue. Donc,
Let me start and ask my colleague to answer. Concerning the Cyber Security Center, we are supposed to work with Elections Canada to make sure that our electoral infrastructure is well protected. And that's what we did during those elections in 2021. But my question was, were you able to identify foreign interference, messages that were sent on social media that were not from political parties, that were not from a political entity, that was from abroad? In our role, we do not examine the content of messages exchanged. Our role is primarily to protect infrastructure. I understand that you were not able to identify that. If you were able to identify that, would you have been able to block them to say this post, for example, comes from abroad? It is foreign interference. Please do not read this post. Are you able to do that? Because during the elections, some candidates saw such messages coming from nowhere, and they could see those messages. If Canadians can see that during an elections, and you are saying that you are not able to see that, I have a problem, because in principle, you are there to safeguard the infrastructure. You can't see it, but ordinary Canadians can see such posts. Let me clarify. We don't see that because we do not have the mandate to do that. Our role at the Cybersecurity Center is to protect infrastructure and not to look at the content. So it's a matter of the authority that we have at the Cybersecurity Center. Of course, we are concerned about the safety of infrastructure. We are also concerned about any interference in this year. But our role is to educate Canadians to inform themselves as best as they can and to try to seek credible sources. So that's what we focus on. Thank you. When were you aware of the fact that there had been foreign interference during the elections of 2019 and 2021? I'm sorry, I don't know. Maybe Ms. Anderson.
This question, so thank you. First of all, I'm going to start out by saying that foreign interference does not only occur during an election. Foreign interference occurs all the time, every day. And I think we have to bear that in mind, because when you start to look at an election, which is a finite time frame, you're not going to always catch the foreign interference that's happening at that point. We start watching at what's happening every day in regards to the build-up to an election. And so we are constantly monitoring to see if there's any type of foreign interference coming from a hostile state actor. So when you're looking at a specific time frame and you're dealing with perhaps a social media attack, it takes a very long time to be able to figure out where that actually came from. You don't just flip a switch and you've got it back to the country that came from or the threat actor it came from. It takes a long time for the intelligence services to put that work together and follow that train back. When you're looking at social media also, we do not monitor social media. And you don't want your National Intelligence Service to monitor all social media. We have to make sure that we know that there's a threat there, and then it comes under our mandate.
Thank you. Last question. Knowing the source of an attack is one thing, but to know that the attack could influence Canadians and is illegal because it's not managed by Elections Canada, it doesn't fall under the laws of Elections Canada. Canadians are involved with elections, but those attacks, when they come in, should be detected and condemned. There should be a way of telling people that people should ignore such messages because they come from abroad. Is that possible?
Très rapide.
A very quick answer, please.
We have to also guard freedom of speech. And so we have to educate across the board to make sure that, one, we are guarding freedom of speech, but that then we are also educating at the same time in regards to foreign interference. It's an extremely complex situation, and it's not just determining, oh, yep, okay, this came from a foreign state. We also have to make sure that it's actually causing an impact to our sovereignty and our national security. And then we start to educate across the broader sphere on that perspective.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Merci, Mr. Gourde. Mr. Baines, you got 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. And I too would like to thank you for the work that you do to protect Canadians. Ms. Henderson, you talked a little bit about. I'm a father of a teen and a preteen. And we're all concerned about the youth of this country, and we've learned over time how foreign states like Russia, they'll work for a long time to try to influence a generation of people. And you also mentioned that there's efforts to influence a whole generation of people. Is that being done by? Is that same practice now being followed by some of these other hostile nations that you've talked about, whether it was China, Russia, Iran, North Korea? Are they copycatting? Are there developments of other applications that you think that are in development to do that type of influence? Like TikTok, I know we're looking at TikTok now, and all these other social media platforms, quite frankly, that are even based out of North America, but are known or used worldwide. So, are you monitoring other developments of other applications that we may not know of?
So thank you for the question. We don't necessarily monitor the development of social media platforms. And it goes a little bit back to what I said earlier about I would worry that we focus on one specific platform or two specific platforms. I think it's really important to start to educate everybody on really good, I'm going to use the phrase social media hygiene. I don't know if that's a phrase, but I'm going to call it social media hygiene, because I think it's fundamentally important that every individual takes responsibility for what they're actually sharing and is aware of the cost and the impact that that could have on them. Therefore, if people are being aware and careful, then even if there are other media platforms, they're already in a good state of mind because they're protecting themselves. And it doesn't matter if there's another platform developed because they already have, I'm going to use a phrase again, good social media hygiene practices.
Okay, and maybe I'll go to Mr. Curry. The CSE also alerts the government to foreign activities that seek to undermine, prosperity, security, including cyber threats, espionage, terrorism, kidnappings. Is the intelligence gathered, collected from social media platforms also for these kinds of things?
Thank you for the question. In my role as the head of the Cyber Center, I'm here to share with you the threat landscape as we see it. That threat landscape is informed from a number of sources. Some of them are public sources, some of them are classified sources. But in a sense, whenever we find something, we will distill it down and we will put it out there regardless of where the source is.
Okay, and were you able to watch the committee's meeting October 18th where representatives from TikTok testified? And if so, what did you think of their testimony? They felt they were being unfairly targeted. Did you find their testimony in relation to security, privacy, and data concerns persuasive, or any concerns you have with them, with their use of third-party or information sharing between third parties?
Unfortunately, I did not watch the testimony of the date that you had indicated.
Okay, so they did mention that they had. We asked them several questions around third parties having access to information, and they felt they were being unfairly targeted. Do you find that that's a concern with someone like TikTok specifically, and their ability to for third parties to have shared information?
It's definitely, thank you again for the question. I mean, the concern that we have is who has access to the data, where does the data reside, how easy it is for the host nation to get access to the data. So that is what we are asking everybody who uses a social media app to ask themselves those questions, to be a better informed user of social media. So in the case of TikTok, if the data is hosted in China, then that would be a concern considering some of the laws of China, to permissive laws over there to get access to user data. So that, for us, we want Canadians to ask those tough questions about security settings to be better informed consumers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Baines. Mr. Curry, we're going to go, on va à Monsieur Villemure pour 2 minutes et demie.
Mr. Villemure, 2.5 minutes, followed by Mr. Green. Mr. Villemure, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Madam Ms. Anderson. You talked about education. We need to educate on all dangers surrounding social media. The answer to the question as to the dangers and risks, it's not everyone who has answers to those questions. For those of us in the committee, we are familiar with that, but amongst the general population, people don't know. So where should this education take place?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. That's another very important question.
It's to happen at all levels. And again, I'm not a policy person. I'm a mother. And I would like to make sure that my kids got educated at schools, at community centers, across the board. I think that's what we need to start to have that greater engagement. But that's speaking from as a mother, not as a security officer. I do think we need to have that education piece, absolutely, fundamentally important.
Maintenant, je vais poursuivre avec vous, s'il vous plaît. Vous avez parlé beaucoup d'ingérence.
You talked, Mr. Curry, you talked about foreign interference, but in the minute and a half left, what should we know as a committee that we do not already know when it comes to foreign interference?
1 minute.
À qui est-ce que tu poses?
Who is that question for? It's still for Ms. Anderson. Ms. Anderson?
So foreign interference is something that we have been looking at from the service. I've been in the service for 32 years as well, and from the day I started, we were investigating foreign interference, and it has been something that is in our country for decades. And Canadians have become very complacent and comfortable in our environment. And I think we need to become much more aware of what's going on around us. It's become much more prevalent with the advent of social media and the technology that we're dealing with. We are at risk from the activities of hostile states. They are interested in undermining our sovereignty and undermining our democratic institutions. And it's fundamentally important to protect the national security of our country, to protect the future of our country, that we take the necessary precautions, awareness, education, in order to protect us and our systems moving forward.
Merci, Monsieur Villemure.
Merci.
Thank you.
A working class guy in Barrie to a working class guy in Hamilton.
Appreciate you.
2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to your public advisories, Mr. Cowrie. You mentioned that you provide general advice about social media. And I note that in a January 2023 article in the CBC, it stated that the CSE hasn't issued an advisory against using TikTok. Have you, to this date, issued an advisory against using TikTok?
Thanks for the question. We don't, in our role, we don't issue advisory on specific apps. We share advisory and guidance on social media in general.
Was it your advice to ban TikTok to the Treasury Board when they were investigating this?
This is the decision by the CIO of Canada.
So you did not advise them to ban it?
We contribute to the input into the decision. We are part of the round table with Treasury Board.
At any time, did you advise to ban TikTok?
No.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Madhu, I noted that Ms. Henderson didn't have the answer to my question, but was CSIS consulted when the government decided to ban TikTok?
Not to my knowledge, no. Thank you.
Did you advise at any time that the government should ban TikTok from government phones?
We provide advice to the government on foreign interference in the general sense, but I'm not aware of us advising specifically to the social media platform.
I'm still struck that this one social media platform, given all of the controversies around all the other ones, was targeted. It feels like it was a political decision, not an evidence-based decision. That's my opinion. It's not yours. But I would ask, you know, in terms of threats, you have the mandate to investigate threats to national security. How often does CSIS investigate activities on social media platforms as it relates to threats to national security, Mr. Madhu?
We investigate threat actors. We don't investigate social media platforms. So depending on how threat actors are evolving, we may have insight into what goes on a platform, but otherwise we investigate actors.
How often do you detect the presence of foreign interference services on social media platforms?
Sorry, Mr. Madhu, if you can just a little bit closer to the microphone would help the interpreters. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. If you could just repeat the question.
How often does CSIS detect the presence of foreign interference services or actors on social media platforms?
I think that detecting sort of counter-narrative on social media platforms may be a common occurrence, but to link them specifically to a hostile threat actor is a bit more complex. So I'm not sure how often that happens. We do know that threat actors, such as my colleague mentioned from the PRC or Russia or other hostile state actors do that, but I don't have a specific number for you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Kirk, 3 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair. And thanks to our witnesses for being here. In the fallout of the October 7th attack on Israeli citizens, there was information shared by a terrorist organization that the Prime Minister, the Foreign Affairs Minister, and other members of the government and other political parties shared that the IDF had bombed a hospital. This became spread like rapid fire on social media, yet was deemed to be very quickly to be categorically false. Our 5 allies knew that this was misinformation, but our government refused to react. That is an example. Can Ms. Henderson, can you share how that sort of actions of the government would contribute to the erosion of trust and maybe some of the challenges associated with social media and the influence that foreign states could have over the Canadian population?
Not quite sure what you're asking me. I'm sorry.
So when the Minister of Foreign Affairs refused to retract what misinformation, they contributed to misinformation that spread rapidly online. I know it showed up in my feed, and it was forwarded to me by constituents as well. When governments are slow to respond to combating misinformation, does that contribute to foreign state actors and the influence that they may have over Canadians?
So, thank you for the question. How I would answer that would be to say that in any situation, any foreign threat actor is always monitoring everything that's going on within a country of interest, and they will pick up on any little piece of information and they can magnify that into misinformation or disinformation in order to achieve their goal, and they will continue to magnify that until they feel that the damage is done.
I appreciate that. So certainly the need to combat misinformation is essential. Now, in the about 45 seconds I've left to either here, there's a disconnect between what TikTok has shared with this committee, between the privacy settings that may be present on a phone and the gray side of social media where there may be unknown information that is collected. So I'm wondering if Ms. Henderson, you can comment about how we reconcile that disconnect that exists between what social media companies are saying versus what we're hearing today and has been reported in the media.
So thank you for the question. I think the way to answer, I'm going to answer that is just indicate there is always going to be that, as you noted, a gray area. So there is the policy and what the social media company is collecting and engaging intentionally, such as they had indicated email addresses. But as Mr. Curry had indicated earlier, it's not only the email address that you've signed up, but it's everything else that you are doing as an individual on that site that is also data that can be collected. And that's what we call, in many cases, big data, that they will scrape all that big data off and then they can do their data crunching. So that is where some of the danger comes in, and that's where they can start to find the trends and the ways they can do the interference and the influence.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Mr. Kellaway, you have 3 minutes to close things up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I share my time with Pam Dameloff, please, the first 30 seconds? Thank you.
I just need a few seconds. I just wanted to clarify something Mr. Kurek said, because the Canadian government actually reviewed the information on the hospital bombing on our own, and the Prime Minister quite emphatically in the House of Commons and elsewhere confirmed that it was not Israel who bombed the hospital. In fact, I remember the Conservative colleague standing up and applauding when he said that in the House. So I just want to make sure the record reflects that we did do our own investigation, Chair, and that we did, in fact, call out the misinformation. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Kellaway.
Chair, I would just note that that was 5 days after the information was shared.
Go ahead, Mr. Kellaway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And from one working class person to another, so I got to keep that trend going. I really appreciate the work you do. I can't imagine the work that you do. I have so many questions, but in a period of time that I have, I couldn't possibly do it justice. One in particular item that keeps coming up is education, and as an educator, I would love to unpack what that truly does mean. As you mentioned, the tooth may be out of the toothpaste container, but what do we do? So I'm going to just try to crystallize it down to one basic thing. In terms of the radicalization of youth via TikTok or other platforms by foreign entities, can you kind of drill down for us, and this is for any one or all three, can you try to quantify how serious that is, or to the best of your ability?
So I think it's a very serious problem. I think we have hostile, and I wouldn't even, these aren't going to be hostile states. Hostile terrorist organizations. And these individuals will be sitting in another country, and they're out there monitoring social media, they're out there creating their own websites, and they're out there looking for youth. They're looking for those individuals who perhaps are on their own, sitting in their room, on their computers, exploring and trying to answer questions, and they're very vulnerable. And then those individuals pick up and they build a relationship. Traditionally in the espionage world, we used to almost call that creating a honeypot. You go and you attract these individuals to come to you. That's what they do. And then once they've got these individuals, they continue to work on them. They continue to give them media pictures. They build that extremist ideology, and they mold that young mind. That's what I'm very, very worried about, because I think that we have a lot of very vulnerable youth at this time and a lot of very hostile actors that are willing to take advantage of those children.
Do I have much?
I think we can end on that point.
That'd be
That's
fine.
Okay,
That'd be fine.
Because I
Thank you,
think
Mr.
it was
Chair.
a good point
Appreciate
to make. The only, and I am gonna, and I don't know who to direct this question to, but one of the things that we haven't touched on yet is the impact of artificial intelligence and bot farms in the whole scheme of social media, and the impact that that may have going forward. So I think I probably direct my question to Mr. Curry. AI, bot farms, how concerned should we be with the potential that that will have on influencing not just young people, but all Canadians going forward?
Thank you for the question. So we're definitely concerned about misuse of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence comes with opportunities, but also with challenges. We know that artificial intelligence is often used to amplify misinformation, and that is part of the algorithmic nature of some of those tools to amplify misinformation. We're also concerned about information leakage through artificial intelligence when you interact online. So we've put out some advice and guidance to Canadians on how to make use of some of the public tools that are out there in terms of artificial intelligence, but also to be aware of the threat that is inherent in the use of artificial intelligence and how some countries or some states are trying to exploit AI algorithms for their benefits.
And it's changing rapidly. So what's the center doing to stay on top of this? How are you staying on top of this as AI evolves and changes rapidly and has a tremendous impact on the future? What are you doing about that?
Thank you again for the question. So we're doing a number of things. One is our own internal research on what is the state of the art in terms of what AI is up to these days. But from a government perspective, we're also working close with Treasury Board to ensure that the advice and guidance to the rest of the government department on how to use that tools is an informed advice. And then beyond government, we've put out some publication. We offer, speaking opportunities to inform about the threat that AI comes. So absolutely opportunities, but also know that the flip side of that opportunity is also potentially a challenge or a threat.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curry, Ms. Henderson, and Mr. Madhu for appearing before the committee. I want to, on behalf of the committee, say thank you and for your service on behalf of Canadians. We're going to suspend for a minute. We're going to come back. We've got our next witness. We are going to be in need of some committee business, probably just about 5 minutes. I know we've scheduled 15, so we should have enough time to answer questions or ask questions and have them answered. And we are going to suspend for a minute while we change up here. Thank you, everyone. meeting today. From the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, I'd like to welcome Sharon Polsky, who is the president. Ms. Polsky, you have 5 minutes to address the committee. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to share some views about whether and how social media can undermine privacy, safety, security, and democracy. I am Sharon Polsky, president of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that is not funded by government or industry. And it has members in the public and private sector who routinely use social media in their personal and professional lives. Many can recall when Google Mail was introduced. It was a brilliant marketing maneuver that preyed on human nature. Only the chosen few who were selected to have an account could have one. And the invitation accorded those few people special status among their peers. The tactic and the media attention created demand. There was no talk about downsides or risk or privacy. People just wanted to have that Google account. It was simple psychology that showed how easily people can be manipulated. And since then, we have seen countless examples of big tech manipulating us to share the most intimate details of our existence online. Social media continues to leverage human nature, and the lucrative data broker industry is the biggest beneficiary other than those who would manipulate us for their own benefit, whether companies, political parties, or governments. With recent geopolitical events, it's easy to think that what people post to social media might be used to coerce, extort, or manipulate, but crediting social media alone or social media from one country or another is short-sighted. Online risks reflect society and come from many sources, including familiar communication and collaboration tools that many in this room probably use most days. And every one of them is a real and constant threat. Zoom, Teams, Slack, Facebook, and the rest are all foreign. It's no secret that many companies scrape data to justify their actions by saying that they consider the information to be public because their AI systems were able to find it on the web. Maybe the secured location where you posted personal or confidential information, or the Ontario hospital you visited recently, has been breached, and now your health condition or sensitive conversations are being sold on the dark web. If the concern is that people who use social media might disclose information that could make them politically sensitive and at greater risk of being influenced, then I look to the recording we hear every time we call our cell phone provider or most other companies that says, "This call will be recorded for training." Which typically means training of artificial intelligence systems through machine learning. And the human side of that training is done in countries around the world by individuals who have access to your sensitive information. The Finnish tech firm that recently started using prison labor to do the data labeling. It goes on, and we have no choice whether the labeling is done by someone in Alberta or Albania. There is no control over it, and there is nothing stopping a company or a government from purchasing information because it is available largely through the data broker system. It is widely available internationally. I could go on and on to say, yes, certainly, education is important. Computers have been on desktops for almost a half a century. The education is not there yet. As we see big tech investing tens of billions of dollars a year, objecting to and undermining efforts to regulate the industry with the claim that it will undermine innovation. It's a red herring that's been disproven many times through history. We see dating sites that people use routinely that are wonderful for a social life, But when things like the Canadian dating site Ashley Madison was breached, I dare say that many of their customers became politically sensitive. If it's children or adults who go onto any website, usually before they even see the results, the fact that they have been there, whether it's for mental health, addiction counseling, medical counseling, that they have been on that website has already secretly been transmitted to the likes of Facebook and data brokers. So this isn't something that Bill C-27 is going to fix or any of the other legislation. In fact, most of the laws being introduced here and abroad will make the situation much worse for everybody, including children, especially children. And I am happy to take your questions.
Thank
this
you.
is a massive endeavor. I commend you all.
Thank you, Ms. Polsky, and I'm sure our members have lots of questions for you, and you will be the only one answering them. So here we go. Mr. Barrett, 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yes. Thank you very much, and welcome back to our committee. One of the big challenges I think that we face is when somebody downloads an app, they click a check mark of terms and conditions, and there's education increasingly about what should or shouldn't be posted on social media, but there's this kind of gray world out there as to what information is actually being harvested, accessed, location, and otherwise. In fact, it was this committee that looked into the fact that cell phone location information was shared with the government during the COVID-19 pandemic, which detailed, people's trips to liquor stores and grocery stores and other public places. So, to our witness, how do we reconcile this now big data world where somebody will download an app, check a box, and all of a sudden their information goes to something that we don't really understand where or the impacts of where that data is going?
Terrific question, especially considering that previous witnesses in this committee from CSE and CSIS said repeatedly that it is up to the consumer, including children, to read the privacy policy and understand what is going on. A lot of my colleagues and members of the committee of the Privacy and Access Council of Canada, they don't get it. They don't understand it. How can we reasonably expect children or anybody else to? I live this stuff. Most people don't. How does it happen? Because largely it's foreign companies. Our laws are obsolete, ineffective, poorly enforced. They do it because they can.
And are we seeing the gaps that you're highlighting being? Can you point to examples in Canada where that's being leveraged for foreign state actors, for other entities that would try to do Canadians harm? Can you point to examples and say that's where we're seeing the consequences of this being played out in real time?
I think it is pervasive. I also, in the last half hour, it took me a few minutes to find the birthdays of all but 3 members of this committee. And to you, an advance happy birthday next week. It's very easy.
Yeah.
Our information is out there. And even if we put bogus information, I mean, you can imagine what my children went through. And they have their online birthdays. And on their real birthdays, their friends say, happy birthday. The algorithms pick up on that. The algorithms detect by the volume of greetings on the real date that's the real birthday. And the other information that is amassed through this hidden data broker system where our information is traded and sold and bid on instantly, the minutiae of our lives are available globally for sale.
I appreciate that, and thanks for the birthday wishes. And I'm certainly much younger than I look, so that's thanks, Chair. So we see, the thing that triggered this study was largely the issue of TikTok and the government banning that on mobile devices, government mobile devices. We saw just a number of weeks ago the government banned WeChat, which has certainly far more closely connected direct connections, rather, with the communist dictatorship in Beijing. So I guess my question is, those are two examples that have made headlines that the government has taken action on, but we saw the weather app, or a weather app, be one of the apps that was selling data that led to the government purchased over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I guess more generally, can you provide your insight to the committee in about a minute, if you can, about how we look at this perspective in the big picture, to look beyond just TikTok or WeChat or social media, but the access that we are giving to entities that has an incredible amount of information?
I agree. It's not just a matter of one social media platform or another, or one company, or one government or another. This is pervasive, and it's been growing for a generation. What do we do about it, and how do we stop it? Yes, education starting at the very youngest ages. Is it too late to put the genie back in the bottle? No. There is so much information about each of us floating out there that we don't even realize that we individually are at a loss. Corporately, people who are the procurement officers, who know as much or as little as most people, are at the mercy of the vendors. They're not interested in your privacy or yours. They're interested in their commission and their bottom line, and their shareholders benefiting.
Now, I am out of time, so I'm going to ask maybe for you to follow up with some information, but would you be able to provide to this committee some specific recommendations? And we're talking largely about the impacts that this has on children, so would you be able to provide the committee with some suggestions, recommendations that this committee could make in terms of being able to address this as specifically with children, but also the much larger societal impact that this has? I don't have time for you to answer that question. Hopefully you can provide that to the committee at a later date.
Thank you. That's a good request, actually. Mr. Sassy, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Polsky. That was very, very helpful. I had a few questions. The first one is we had Mr. David Lieber, who's the head of privacy public policy for the Americas for TikTok, testify before our committee. I was just wondering, did you have a chance to review that testimony by any chance?
Some of the written record, yes.
Okay. Was it misleading, in your opinion?
No. Was it a complete, thorough, fulsome answer? I don't know. But from my experience, and keeping in mind I'm the president of the Privacy and Access Council. I've also been a privacy advisor for about 30 years, so I've been inside lots of organizations and seen lots of things. Very often, the language, whether it's, I suppose, in testimony, in media reports, in so-called privacy policies, it doesn't give the full story.
Sure.
We'll collect your information and share it with our partners and affiliates. Who? When? Where in the world? For what purpose?
So one of the things he did actually say, which struck me as somewhat odd, was he said, well, no one has anything to worry about because we are subject to Canadian law. Is that any comfort? Because if they have data, and as you were suggesting, they're sending it out to Albania or what have you, even if you're subject to Canadian law, I don't think there's much we can do, is there?
Well, as lawmakers, you could not enact Bill C-27 because that's not going to make it better. It's going to make it worse. What can we do? Is PIPED a comfort? No, because it's not sufficient. As Jennifer Stoddard said when she was in the final days of her role as the commissioner, it could use some more teeth. And that was how many years ago? It still needs some more teeth. Canadian organizations, sure, they're responsible for the proper collection, use, disclosure, all the rest of it under PIPEDA, but when the information goes offshore, they lose control of it. And we as Canadians have no recourse when our information is in a foreign nation and it goes into the wind. Or we see things like whether it is Equifax, Meta, Google, or any other organization that breaches our privacy, one commissioner or another somewhere in the world hammers them with a multi-million dollar, or hundreds of millions of dollars of a fine. They put it in their financial report as a line item. It reduces their tax liability. Suivant next. That's all. It's lunch money to them. And it's to the company, not an individual.
Thank you for that. Now, another question I had is, another thing we should be very much concerned about is ransomware. Could you talk about the intersectionality between these social apps and the information that's obtained and then is leveraged against consumers?
I think ransomware, like so many problems we have online, are a reflection of society, and they are the same types of crimes that were committed before the Internet. The Internet is a tool that allows the perpetrators to commit these crimes in greater number with greater efficiency and cost efficiency from their side, greater returns, terrific. But it's no different. It's really no different. The problem is education again. You can have the best technology, the greatest security. If somebody doesn't have the courage to question the boss or call up the president and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, but did you actually send this?" If they don't have the curiosity, the skepticism, especially nowadays, to question what is presented in their email, and I'm sure they act in good faith, they click the wrong thing. That opens the entire organization up to ransomware and to problems. And the company, the organization can recover, but what about all the individuals whose personal information has now been compromised? In the case of Equifax, 146 million Americans, the payout, the negotiated settlement, the fine. I remember Kevin Mitnick, when he was still alive, on LinkedIn showing the check he got for $5.42. That's supposed to help him recover. Canada, the Canadians who were affected got 1 or 2 years of credit monitoring that was administered through Equifax's American organization.
And my last question is, given that you have probably had the opportunity to look at various jurisdictions, what jurisdiction would you say does the best job of ensuring that privacy rights are protected?
At this point, the EU, because of the GDPR and because at the very last minute they put the brakes on a piece of legislation that would have required basically encryption being broken to facilitate police being able to find the predators. And the police do that now without the encryption backdoors.
Thank you, Ms. Polsky, Mr. Sassi. La prochaine intervention est avec...
The next intervention is from Mr. Villemure.
Villemure.
Mr. Villemure, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Polsky. It's a pleasure to have you here, and at the same time, I learned about the birthday of my colleague. How would you describe the behavior of social platforms when we talk about privacy?
Self-interested, because they are for-profit organizations. And they do what they have to improve their bottom line and provide the greatest return possible to their investors and shareholders.
Est-ce qu'elles se valent toutes ou certaines?
Are they all the same, or are some better than others, or worse?
I think there are some that are better. They do take a a greater interest in individuals' privacy, and I could name the Tor project, Signal, and Proton are the three that come to mind. They're not particularly social media platforms, but they are certainly communications tools that don't take any information, no metadata, no nothing. They don't keep it. So that provides much greater security, and their encryption and technology is much stronger.
Mais sur les plateformes sociales,
For social media platforms, which are better when it comes to privacy protection?
That's a very, very difficult one because each one of them has their own interests at heart. They collect the information and provide advertisers with the opportunity to reach our eyeballs. I don't know that there are any of them really interested in our privacy.
sur ce sujet, j'aimerais que vous nous disiez
I would like you to tell us something about the capitalism of surveillance. What can a committee like ours do to mitigate the impact?
Surveillance capitalism, the term that Shoshana Zuboff coined, is a wonderful term. We could also call it the surveillance economy because nowadays much of our economy is based on surveillance in one way or another, whether we realize it or not. What can be done? I think the same way that before a drug is allowed to be sold in Canada, before a vehicle is allowed to be sold and licensed in Canada, a lot of products, they have to be tested by an independent Canadian authority to make sure they are fit for purpose and safe. I think the same thing has to apply to the technology that we all use every day that now is being sold by, again, self-interested corporations, and that all fosters the surveillance economy. The only way of pulling back and having our information be used continuously as fodder for surveillance and for spin doctors saying, well, everybody is okay with it because they keep giving their information, despite the fact that we really have very little option or way of opting out. It's up to our government to regulate it despite the objections of big tech.
Et vous avez dit un peu plus tôt que
Earlier, you said that in spite of the efforts made in Bill C-27, it's useless to help protect privacy, correct?
Well, I think it's a step backwards from what we now have in PIPEDA because, first of all, the first word is the Consumer Privacy Act, labeling us all as consumers. We are commodities with our information to be commoditized. It provides a private right of action. Once we complain to the commissioner, who is, like most of them, chronically underfunded, once they finally get around to assigning the file, investigating, deciding, determining, it will go to a new tribunal that will have to, I expect, review at least, if not provide a fulsome reinvestigation. If the tribunal agrees with the commissioner that a fine is in order, then the offending company has a right to take it back to court. And how many years will that take? And once they have exhausted their legal recourse, then you and I get to advance our private right of action to pay another lawyer and go through what? Another 7 to 10 years?
donc pas très utile.
So, not very useful. Earlier, you said that the mere presence on a website, even before we click on consent, is already data we're providing. Could you tell us more about that?
Yes, this is a feature that I've found that a lot of organizations, the people who create the websites, don't talk to the people in the privacy office, shall we say. And it's the old story that we'll put in all these wonderful tools that can collect the information. It's really neat. Hey, we can do something with it maybe in the future, without knowing, because of lack of education, that they are over-collecting. The way it works is they put in, it's similar to a cookie, and before you even see the website you've called up, the fact that you are there has already been transmitted to Facebook, to data brokers.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemure.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
6 minutes, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and I certainly appreciate your, I think, quite right analysis of the consumer as the commodity. I think that is absolutely what underscores most of what we're talking about here. And if I'm correct, were you here for the previous panel in terms of my lines of questioning? You would note that I brought up quite frequently the notion that there isn't one boogeyman in this scenario, but in fact, all platforms are engaged in this type of surveillance capitalism. And whether or not a foreign state actor, Visa, ByteDance, has direct access, or another dictatorial regime purchases it, as the highest bidder from another, fundamentally there isn't really a difference. They have the data. Would you agree with that analysis?
Absolutely, because our information is being sold and traded and bid in real time. And we don't know it, and we can't say, no, don't do that, because we have no idea who is bidding on our information. We don't have a direct relationship with them. We have no recourse. Our information is gone.
And on that, I want to talk about the recourse. You had mentioned about the teeth that you'd like to see in legislation. With specificity, could you just take a moment and just reflect on the types of teeth that you would like to see in a proposed legislation that would deal with privacy in a more fulsome way?
I can give you a very quick example. The same way that companies now are fined, but not the individuals, it's meaningless. By contrast, after the Enron scandal, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the United States passed the SOX legislation, Sarbanes-Oxley Financial Accountability Act, I think is the complete name. And that said very simply, the person at the head of the organization is responsible for everything in the financial statement. If things go sideways, they personally face multi-million-dollar fines and jail time. Companies around the world, including Canada, scrambled to make sure they were SOX compliant. We need the same thing.
And so is it your assertion that by not granting kind of full information and full consent when somebody engages in an app or a platform, that is a type of fraud committed by the company and therefore should have a criminal liability to it? Is that?
I wouldn't go so far as saying it's fraudulent, perhaps misleading, permitted under the current legislation and under C-27, because although it's going to maintain the status quo, the same vague consent, and that's not going to improve privacy.
And so here's a chance for you now to address that specific consent clause. I would say if you're not entering in with kind of full understanding, you can't consent. And I would say that if you're downloading an app for a certain use and your use of that app is then sold to third parties that you don't know about, and the real purpose of the act, and I referenced Cambridge Analytica, they had your life and data, I can't remember what the exact name of the app was where they scraped all this information. I would say it's fraud. You don't have to say that, but I would say it's a fraudulent kind of engagement of the consumer. But as it relates to consent, again, if you could just maybe provide with specificity the types of explicit consent that you would like to see so that people who engage with these platforms would have like full prior knowledge to what it is they're engaging in.
Okay, there's two things that you're talking about here, I think. One is the companies, the organizations that are supposed to obtain our informed consent at the time of or prior to collecting our personal information, they acknowledge, as does Mark Zuckerberg, as he did before Congress, that few people read these privacy policies. which to me says they are collecting our personal information knowingly that nobody reads the privacy policy. Therefore, it is not informed consent. So they are in violation of our privacy legislation and GDPR and others. What to do about it? Turn it around. Stop allowing the organizations to be in control. Turn it around so that we each have the ability to
Opt in rather than opt out?
No, not more than just opt in, opt out. Interrogate the company. Make it so that there is an index of companies so that consumers can go and see, did your company, how do you comply with the legislation? If your company does in a way that is more, greater, better than yours, the consumer can make a choice. I allow my information to be used by your company for a certain purpose. I get a receipt. There is a record of it that I am in control of, not the company.
I appreciate that. You know, I think in the last study you were here, it was about surveillance on phones, I believe, with the RCMP some time back.
Spyware.
Yeah, and, you know, here we are, right? Like, in a lot of ways, whether it's governments using these devices or corporations using these kind of on-device applications, it's spyware. Would you agree with that assessment, that social media apps are a form of spyware?
Absolutely.
Would you care to expand on that?
Very quickly.
I have a challenge with that sometimes. There's a lot, as I said, to discuss.
Okay.
The granularity of the information they collect about us, usually without us knowing about it, they can use for their own purposes, whether it is the ride-sharing app that we use that records the precise geolocation and the time of day, and who is that given to, and what assumptions can be drawn from that or any other information. It is effectively spying on us. I agree.
Thank you, Ms. Polsky. Monsieur Gould, pour 5 minutes. On va commencer.
Mr. Gould, 5 minutes. We're beginning the second round. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, witness. The statements we've heard from you and from other witnesses before you are concerning because we have become like goods as human beings. These companies have used our profiles, what we buy. They have assigned a profile to each individual, and those profiles are sold to people. I have the impression that for our generation and for all those who use social media right now, it's too late. I am a happy granddad of about 6-7 grandkids. They're still too young to use social media. Should we be working hard to protect that generation? Because I feel it's too late for us.
Protecting the next generation, absolutely. But we're all fighting against well-funded big tech that insists that everybody wants this because nobody understands it well. A few people understand it well enough to object to what it is doing and doing to us. But things have changed very quickly. I think it was in 2004 when a minister of the Canadian government was on the hot seat because it had been discovered by the media that the government was collecting 2,000 bits of information about each of the 33.4, I think, million Canadians when there was some 31 million Canadians. And people reacted quickly and vocally. And then the minister said, never mind, we've given the information back. Electronic data, how you do that, I don't know. And they apparently disbanded it. That very quickly changed to now we have, instead of I deal with one government office or department or another, now I deal with government, and the government says it owns my information. The public policy, the whole concept has shifted. We have to, and I dare say the lawmakers have to, if there's a genuine interest in preserving, protecting children, privacy, and future generations, there needs to be some serious thought given to actually doing that. Studies are wonderful, but action has to be taken very quickly.
Est-ce que
This quest for information about individuals, is this a violation of our individual freedoms?
I've lost it.
Est-ce que la quête
This quest for information from all individuals, is this a violation of our individual freedoms? Individual freedom.
Absolutely, because it's too easy for any organization to use the information that has been amassed about us to sway our views, to sway views of public policy, government, legislators, teachers, institutions. It's absolutely a threat to democracy and civil liberties, human rights. With artificial intelligence is going to make it even worse unless there is effective, strong regulation to protect individuals, not just to foster commerce.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gould. Ms. Demoff, 5 minutes.
Thank you so much for being with us today and bringing your vast knowledge to our committee. I want to go back to youth. And earlier, when we had CSIS and CSE here, I was asking them, when TikTok appeared, they said the only thing we collect is your email address. And then for young people, we make sure that young people, they give us their birthday and everything's just tickety-boo. We don't have any young people that shouldn't be on there. And I did challenge them at the time, and I wondered if you could just share with us a little bit about, young people sign up, they give an email address. How much more information are TikTok and Instagram, which are the two popular ones with young people, what kind of information are they gathering and how are they gathering it? And is it of a concern to you?
I have not investigated either of those companies closely enough to know what they gather, but in more general terms, companies do gather that information. And typically, and keep in mind, we're told, respect authority, when you're asked a question, give an answer, a straight answer, please. People give their real information. It doesn't occur to them to give a made-up name or a made-up birthday or use an email address that is a throwaway or that hides their real email address. So they use their email address, and that gets connected in the background by the data brokers. It's a huge concern. As for how to identify whether somebody is providing their real age or not, there's a lot of companies that are selling the service to say they will collect your government photo ID, they will verify it, they amass that information. That is another threat. And legislation, and I know Canada is thinking about the same thing as the UK and the EU have been thinking about, or in the UK's case, enacted, requiring organizations to collect that information. That is a huge threat.
So just getting back to the young people, we haven't talked at all about apps and filters. So I remember a few years ago there was a thing going around where you could download an app onto your phone that would show you what you would look like in 20 years. And I remember all kinds of people downloading that app, uploading their picture, and it's fun to share these pictures. And then it turns out that the company was based in China and that information was actually not secure. I often see young people who have downloaded filters that can turn them into different, what's your Disney character? Or what is your, whatever the filter or app might be. I'm just wondering if you have concerns about those kind of things that appear to be fun, but are in fact quite dangerous in terms of the information that you're sharing.
I think they're very much like the questions you get. What's your favorite dog, your favorite animal, your favorite color? If you were a car, what would you be? These are all subtle ways of gathering information about people and their psychological makeup and their preferences. And you don't know who's collecting it and what they're going to use that information for. It's a huge concern, absolutely.
Well, I mean, I hadn't thought of that, but quite often on Facebook it'll be take this quiz. What city were you born in? Where did you go to school? And often people don't look at their security settings to see who they're sharing with. It ends up being public. And so you've given people all the information that they need to breach your security, because those are often the answers to questions that you use when you have your credit cards or banking information, right? It'll be so. How do we educate the public, though? Because there's an onus on the companies, but there's also an onus on Canadians, because this, well, around the world, but we'll focus on Canada. How do we educate Canadians to be more aware of what they're sharing online?
There are places, well-funded organizations that promote education, but it's a drop in the bucket.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a matter of public policy to require, and I realize this is not a federal jurisdiction thing, but I'm sure the federal government could have some influence perhaps with its provincial and territorial colleagues to say, include this in the mandatory curriculum from pre-kindergarten.
I know that's my time. I used to be on public safety, though, and digital literacy is something that we've asked for many times in getting it in the schools. Thanks for your being generous with my time, Chair.
I'm probably the most generous guy you ever. What are you laughing at? Yeah. Just look up my profile on Facebook. Monsieur Villeneuve, on va commencer avec vous et après ça.
Mr. Villeneuve, we'll go on with you. After that, the last intervention will be for Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes. So, Mr. Villeneuve, it's your turn. Thank you, very kind and generous Chair. Ms. Polsky, you were talking with my colleague, Mr. Green, about improvements that should be made to make sure that we are not find ourselves in a situation where we provide consent without knowing. There are lots of ingredients that you mentioned that I find interesting in what you said.
I've lost the...
Okay, on a perdu la transcription, Monsieur Villemure.
Mr. Villemure.
Channel French? Sorry, English?
I'm on English.
Okay.
But it faded away. I couldn't hear the translation.
Monsieur Villemure, j'ai arrêté ton temps.
Mr. Villemure, I have stopped your time. Could you please ask your question again? Start again, and we'll find out if Ms. Polsky can hear the question. Start over, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Ms. Polsky, a while ago, you were in conversation with my friend, with my colleague, and you provided a list of solutions that could be taken to avoid us falling into a trap of consent. I would like you to continue talking about those solutions, which I found very interesting.
One of the things that we see in existing Canadian and foreign legislation is consent that has no granularity. So you have to consent to the organization collecting information from you and about you. It'll be shared with their business partners and affiliates. You don't know who those are, where in the world they are, or what they're going to do with it. C-27 maintains the status quo, except it's going to have to be in simple, non-legalese English. It doesn't change anything. It's not granular. We need granularity. Actually, the Quebec government has a new piece of legislation enacted about a year ago. The consent portion of it came into effect September of this year. It is better. It's not what it needs to be. It still gives the organizations the reins. We need to turn it around so that the organizations are compelled to actually comply with legislation, be rated on their compliance by an independent organization that creates a publicly available index, if you will, so that we can all go to this index, determine if we want to deal with an organization based on their compliance with the legislation, And then
Donc-
it is up to us to give our
Allez.
consent.
Dans les 10 secondes qu'il me reste, je vais résumer en disant vous aviez
You mentioned that we'll need some kind of a driver to detect such activities. Could you tell us more, or maybe send us a document in writing later? That link that you talked about is very interesting.
I'd be happy to send more information. I'm working with colleagues who are actually developing an international standard and a facility to do just what I've been describing, where it turns it around and puts us in the driver's seat and compels organizations to comply with legislation. And that's important considering that there's still a lot of them in Canada that have yet to comply fully or at all with PIPEDA 20 years later.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemure. Ms. Polsky, Mr. Green, 2 minutes and 52 seconds. Go ahead, sir.
If compliance is an issue, why, and I appreciate the reverse onus, I agree, but why like this kind of rating mechanism that you've imagined instead of just like hard regulation and hard compliance that would have some kind of teeth in and around, you know, culpability of fines that meet kind of a disincentive, or worse, you know, criminal culpability?
Go at it with both prongs so that the organizations have to comply. Think of it as what Ralph Nader did long ago with the auto industry. Some people called it public shaming. If you don't know how an organization is complying, whether they're complying, to what extent they're complying, you're in the dark.
I would agree.
Make it so that they have to publicly fess up.
And you'd mentioned Bill C-27, and I do appreciate that. You'd mentioned that it's the status quo. It's just, you know, basically making them use plain English, but still putting the onus on the person rather than the corporation. So will more legislation be needed to properly regulate social media platforms, in your opinion?
I think there's an awful lot of laws already on our books that address the problems that we see, the societal problems, the human nature problems that we see online and in social media. I don't know that having more laws, certainly not more bad laws, is going to improve anything. So no, look at what we already have, enforce that.
So you think that what we have is sufficient?
If the people in position to enforce had the authority to enforce the laws, yes. It's now we have people who have the responsibility but not enough authority or funding.
Okay, so to be clear, it's your opinion that by increasing the authority for oversight over these platforms with teeth that included a reverse onus on the corporation, as well as regulation and or public shaming, that would be your recommendation to kind of provide a better oversight for social media platforms?
Yes, but I would challenge you on your reference that it's a reverse onus on the corporation. No, it's an obligation that they already face under legislation.
I should say reverse the onus, because presently
yes,
the status quo is that the onus is on the person that could not possibly consent or be informed about where their data goes. And you're suggesting, quite rightly, I would add, in my opinion, that be placed on the people who create the algorithms, broker the information, and ultimately profit from it.
Monetize our information, that's right. They should be the ones to prove that what they are foisting upon an unaware, unsuspecting public is safe, is not going to undermine privacy, security, and national security.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Ms. Polsky, for appearing before the committee today. That concludes our second round of questioning. And I'd like to thank you for the information that you've provided on behalf of Canadians, your work as well. So thank you. We are going to suspend for a couple of minutes. We're going to return back in camera. I expect it's going to be quick. We have a personnel issue that we need to discuss. So I'm going to suspend the meeting for at least a couple more minutes while we set up. Excuse me.
Thank you.